Good afternoon and welcome to a new episode of the BCS. I have to apologize for a little bit of a raspy or coffee voice. A little sick this week. But you got to find the positive in that. You got the Thanksgiving holiday coming up, followed by, the Christmas holidays, all those celebrations with New Year's. I feel like if I get sick now, I'm going to build up my immunities. I'll be fine for all of those holidays, so that'll be fantastic. It's not so bad. I'm going to make it through. And I have a tremendous thank you to give out to Sebastian Martinez, our technology supervisor. Gets all the buttons pushed in the right way. Make sure we're able to convey messages to you. Today we're going to talk about leadership. We're going to have a debate between two great comedic actors. And we're going to finish with the movie of the day. Starting back to, the sickness. I was talking with Sebastian about the YouTube show and saying to him, what do you do? Do we go through with it, or do we just kind of push it off and push it off? We're working out the kinks. We're making things happen. And we are happy to be able to bring you this episode of the BCS. My sister, Kelly Corrigan, is one of the people I've found to be like a fine wine. She's getting a lot better with age. When she was 12, she was a 12-year-old little sister, and we'll just put her in that category for right now. Ever since then, she's been improving with age and is a tremendous guiding post for me, sounding board for me. At times, she can help me in my professional career, in obviously parenting, and I've had the good fortune of helping her with her now coaching career. And coaching and giving back to the community is something that is a great way to find leaders and develop leaders and find out how someone might be able to step outside of their role a little bit and become a better leader. One of the things that she and I talked about for a long time today on the phone was too many times coaches will say to their team or someone on the team, hey, you got to step up. Let's step up. I don't know of a lot of sports that involve ladders, and I don't know how a kid is supposed to decipher what do you actually mean? Where's the action, the usable action? Where can you actually take that and put it into play just without having to interpret it? When we leave things to various assumptions and various interpretations, we're now opening ourselves up and our followers up for miscommunication. I was the head coach of the collegiate lacrosse team back in 2001, and we were going to play a game. It was the last regular season game, and it was away. And I decided that we were going to use the pregame talk to discuss the phrase step up. But rather than say, hey, today's a time to step up because we're playing our arch rival, it's a time to step up because we need to win this game to make the playoffs. It's a time to step up because we're becoming the best version of ourselves. I actually went down my roster and talk to every kid about what does it mean for you to step up today. When you hear someone say step up, and it's a big buzz phrase, people always say, be unselfish. How do you be unselfish? Like, in what way do you want me to be unselfish to best help the team? I went down the roster and talked to each kid about their role and what it meant for them that day to step up. And it's an example of when you're leading people, use the glossary of terms that they know exactly what you're talking about. You can't just say, go out there and win. Hustle. Sometimes you can hustle yourself right out of the play. So, running around, anybody can go out there and run around the field. That they're hustling. Okay, but as my mom taught me, perfect speed is being there. So hustle to the right spot and then capitalize on the fact that you're already in the right spot. Leaders and great leadership is not about building followers. It's about building more leaders. Being a teacher, being a coach, and leading those young people into a classroom or onto a field or a court or a surface where they get to do something that they care about. That's when you can measure their impact on their peers because it's something they care about. I'm going to confess to you that I was never good at chemistry. But we had a young man in our school who was great at helping us understand that he could teach us chemistry. He wasn't any good at sports, and that's fine. But he set up a little leadership group, so he was a leader off the field in a way where he could help us improve into being the best versions of ourselves. Another thing that I strive for leaders to understand is to model the behavior you expect. And sometimes that's as simple as the tone that you use when you're correcting action. If someone turns and throws the ball in the bleachers, you got to be able to help them understand that it was their hands weren't in the right position when they were throwing the ball, or when they were passing the ball in basketball, they didn't look up to see where their teammate was. They just thought they could get it to him without looking. That's an advanced skill, the no-look pass. Oftentimes, young kids get into trouble when they start to do things that they haven't done in practice. That's why a great phrase that I like about leadership is actions speak louder than words. In a relationship, you can say I love you, you can say I care about you, but if your actions are different, now all of a sudden you're becoming deceitful and you're becoming someone that is not playing the game the fair way. So I think your actions should dictate how you feel about someone or how you care about a team or a group of people, whether you're the head coach, assistant coach, or the star player, or just a role player. There's all different ways that those young people can lead. I reference role players. Aristotle once said, "He who has never been taught how to obey can never successfully lead." You have to go through the chain of command in the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. You go in Air Force, you go up the chain of command so they know you've been in their shoes. When you are talking to people that are beneath you in rank and you are directing them in whatever task it is for that day, they know you've been there. You've walked a mile in their shoes. Last thing about leadership that I think is vitally important is in practice, model the behavior you expect. In practice, demonstrate to those young people that you're not there only to fight the fights that you know you can win. You're there to fight the fights that need fighting. Every kid can benefit from knowing that action is something that's necessary to be successful. Fight the fights that need fighting. What does that mean? That means that if you're running plays and they're not working, you need to either A, draw up new plays, or B, keep practicing those plays until they work. It's easy to draw a play up on the board, but if you don't have the right left-handed attackman, or if you don't have the right shooting guard coming off that pick, the play is not going to be successful. And you're putting kids in a position where they, in fact, may be set up for failure. And as a leader, you're trying to help them become the best possible version of themselves, and you're trying to help that team become the best possible version of itself. So leadership, use the glossary of terms that your team knows exactly what you're talking about. Be very deliberate. Another example of using the right verbiage would be, when I was a lacrosse coach, I would tell kids, when we go to get ground balls, you got to focus, take a breath, get your hands low, and scoop the ball correctly the first time. You'd be surprised at how many first-time ground balls that get scooped up don't have to be fought for anymore. And I'll give you a hint. It's 100%. Let's move on. We'll come back to leadership at the end. Let's move on to today's debate of two tremendous comedic actors. I want to look at John Belushi and John Candy. Two actors, obviously, who left us too soon, cut down in the prime of their career. One of the interesting components about this debate is John Belushi had an unbelievable Hall of Fame career at Saturday Night Live and then made some epic movies. John Candy, conversely, had a great career at SCTV. Nice job, that played a bunch of sketches that were absolutely hilarious. And then he went on to some great movie roles. If you look at one of Belushi's most iconic films, and I think one of the best films I've ever seen, is The Blues Brothers. Might be in my top 10 all time. Right there, somewhere around the top 10. You look at John Candy, Stripes. He was a big player in that, but not as big. So right now the edge is going to Belushi because he was one of the mains in Blues Brothers almost every scene. Then you look at another film from him, Animal House. He was not in every scene. I think he only had 37 speaking lines in that movie. You look at John Candy in Stripes, around 37 speaking lines in the movie Stripes, but he was also a key player. Then you look at Uncle Buck, fantastic, and Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Great movies for John Candy. Also, he played in the movie Home Alone. Gus Plazinski, the Kenosha Kickers, Polka Polka Polka, Sheboygan Polka. Played a lot of polkas. I think they sold 638 copies of that one. So Gus, obviously a great character in Home Alone. Belushi, obviously, was in Neighbors. Great character in the movie Neighbors. Did the dramatic role in the film Continental Divide, which was not met by a lot of critical acclaim, so to speak. But those are some of the things that you would debate if you were really analyzing and chopping in to the John Belushi versus John Candy debate. I think both of them would appreciate the fact that, you know what? When push comes to shove, they both had great careers. I give the edge to Belushi because of the performance that he put in the Blues Brothers. So many great lines. So many great lines in that film. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles for John Candy, absolutely phenomenal. He and Steve Martin, it obviously Blues Brothers was Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi. So you have those teams that really come together and do an incredible job of just making the audience forget about where they are for a little while, forget about other things that might be going on in their lives, and enjoy absorbing the roles that those actors are portraying for us. The last thing I want to introduce into that debate is Chris Farley. Where does he fall in that? Because his movie career, Chris Farley's movie career, was not extensive. It was not that big, not that huge, not that amazing. Obviously, Tommy Boy, Hall of Fame. He had a couple other not so big roles in other movies, but really Tommy Boy was the big one. But Chris Farley's ability to create a character on Saturday Night Live might be unmatched. There have been some great comedy guys and gals who have gone through SNL. Will Ferrell being one of them. So many of them. Adam Sandler doing incredible. David Spade. He and Chris Farley had a great run together. Farley with his Bennett Brower character and obviously the Matt Foley character jump off the page at you. They jump off the screen into your living room with you. And it's hilarious to think of what we lost when those men were unfortunately taken away from us too soon. But it's interesting to always look at who really helps you forget about problems for a little bit. I mean, how many of us can look back at John Belushi and just the different things that he did during the course of his acting career in the movie Animal House specifically and the movie The Blues Brothers. Just the way he pulled off all of those different little segments of scenes. And he really did. He hit home runs on a regular basis. And then, obviously John Candy, Dewey Oxberger in Stripes, Uncle Buck, great character, well played by him. So it's a nice debate. It's a fun debate. I've been spinning that off to some of my buds earlier today just to let them know that I was doing it and get their take on it. It's funny, as you may expect, a lot of the older people think it's John Belushi. A lot of my younger folks think it's John Candy. And then the real young folks love the fact that, Chris Farley's even in the discussion. Chris Farley will come up in a later debate because Chris Farley and his characters on Saturday Night Live were literally second to none. Bennett Brower just kills me every time. If you haven't seen the Bennett Brower skit, it's easy. Google it on YouTube. It's up there. Lastly, the movie of the day. Let's talk about this is Spinal Tap. A documentary or a rockumentary, if you will. Nigel Tufnell, David St. Hubbins, and Derek Smalls made up the core of the band. They obviously lost a lot of drummers along the way. They had one drummer who was killed in a bizarre gardening accident. They had one drummer who spontaneously combusted. And they had another drummer who choked on vomit, but it wasn't his vomit. It's a mystery because you can't really dust for vomit, as you know. The other scene in there that I think is, there's so many great scenes. It's like the movie This is Spinal Tap is almost like a bunch of skits that are designed to really make you laugh. The cameos that were involved in Spinal Tap. Billy Crystal was in Spinal Tap. Dana Carvey was in Spinal Tap. Fran Drescher, Ed Begley Jr., Paul Schaefer, all in Spinal Tap. So it's a funny movie. Obviously, Rob Reiner plays the rockumentarist, if you will. But Nigel Tufnell's sitting in the backstage room, and he's trying to spoof on Led Zeppelin when they said that they didn't want any brown M&Ms in their candy jar. And I'll get into why they did that. But it's a spoof. They have the little pieces of rye bread, the little cocktail pieces, and they have the larger pieces of bologna. And Nigel is unfortunately trying to make a sandwich out of the piece of bologna and the bread, and he's trying to fold it, and he literally looks at Ian Faith, the band manager, and he's complaining about the size of the meat versus the size of the bread. And at one point, he declares it a catastrophe, which I thought was usually reserved for something a little bit more important than the size of a piece of bread. Obviously, there's the scene where Derek Smalls is going through the airport, and they're giving him the wand. Lo and behold, Derek has taken the time to wrap a cucumber in aluminum foil and place it where it may appear to be something else. So, again, a spoof on the whole heavy metal band scene. Again, I alluded to the Led Zeppelin reference where they would give a list of demands, and they'd say, this is what we want. And one of the things on the list was always no brown M&Ms in our bowl of M&Ms on the table. And the reason they did that, and it's actually kind of quite clever, is they didn't want to have to worry about checking all the things on the list. So they would just walk in and look at the bowl of M&Ms and see if there were any brown M&Ms. If there were, then they knew they had an issue and they had to go through the list. But if there were no brown M&Ms, they could then assume that these people have taken care of everything on the list because they were dumb enough to take the brown M&Ms out. So kind of clever on their part. Once they saw no brown M&Ms, they knew, okay, they've taken care of everything else on the list. So that's an interesting part of it. The other thing that kind of struck me from the movie Spinal Tap is their big Smell the Glove tour, where they talked about being sexy and how they have, a person in a dog collar and a leash being led to force smell a glove, and their defense was she wasn't being forced to smell it. It was simply being offered to her. And what's wrong with being sexy? So it's an interesting turn of events there. Obviously, these go to 11 amplifier scene with Nigel Tufnell is a good one. When Rob Reiner reads the reviews of one of Spinal Tap's concerts or albums, and they say that, that obviously the review was scathingly bad, and Nigel's reply was, well, that's just nitpicking. So it's interesting to know that Spinal Tap's out there doing things that, they still have reunions. They still have a following. This is a Spinal Tap. Ian Faith booking the hotel, and they walk through and they see big rock and roll star Dr. Johnny Fever, and they pester him for a little bit. And then Dr. Johnny Fever looks at him and says, guys, sorry I can't hang out. We got to go down and sit in the lobby. So they certainly do know how to put somebody in their place. The Hello Cleveland scene from Spinal Tap, where they're going around the bottom of the stadium and they cannot find the entrance to the stage. Various rock and roll bands have come out and said that has actually happened to them, where they have been backstage in their bus or come into the thing and they walk down a certain corridor and that's not the entrance to the stage. So then they get turned around and they go this way, not the entrance. So it's one of those things where, before they walk out every door, they're ready to rock and roll. Here we go, rock and roll, Hello Cleveland, not the right door. So different things that go on throughout that movie that are positively hilarious. But these go to 11 about the amplifiers that sort of really puts in perspective for you as far as the comedy in the movie. This is Spinal Tap. If you haven't seen it, some of you youngsters probably haven't seen it yet. It is worth the watch, and it is kind of funny. The Stonehenge scene where they try to make 18-foot tall Stonehenge replicas, and they end up with 18-inch tall. So they decide to use dwarfs to make the Stonehenge prop look like it's a little bit bigger. Obviously doesn't work too well, but they certainly do. And the puppet show, they didn't take top billing on the marquee of the puppet show, but they did get a bigger dressing room than the puppets did. So obviously a hilarious scene in that one also. If you haven't had a chance to check out Spinal Tap, please do. Back to leadership, the most important thing. I love the review, the highlight lesson of the day. Lead, follow, or get the hell out of the way. Find the people you know can lead and follow them until you're able to lead someone else. You don't have to be a leader on the court, in the locker room, in the classroom, in the lunchroom, after school, during school, in your advisor group. There are opportunities to be a leader all day, every day. You don't have to be in one spot or the other. You can be a little bit of a leader everywhere. One of the discussions I had with a great coach recently was about you might be the captain of the team, in which case they've acknowledged your ability to lead. You might be a starter on the special teams or on, a man-up player in lacrosse or a seventh man coming off the bench. There's always a chance for you to lead, even in something as simple as in stretching lines or in chemistry class when you're doing a lab. There's an opportunity for you to lead during that lab demonstration and say, hey, let's try, to do it a different way. Problem solving. Interesting little thought. If you've ever done an escape room, there's an opportunity to lead all day long in there. And one of the things I love about doing the escape room, which I've done with my girl Tanya, we did it in Florida a couple times. She's amazing. And I do love the idea of the escape room because at any instant, someone can come up with some potential solution, but you have to lead the group into knowing there's a problem, acknowledging that you have a proper solution, and then implementing the solution. So keep looking, seeking out those opportunities to lead, because we all get better when we get another person's value into the group. I mentioned on one of my previous shows that if I had an hour to solve a problem, I would spend 55 minutes talking about the problem. And within the next 5 minutes, the solution would probably present itself, and likely and usually does. But the first potential solution is always acknowledging that there's a problem and taking accountability for the problem, and now looking for the ways the problem can be solved. But it always goes back to solving the problem. And as a leader, it always goes back to, as Aristotle said, he who has never been taught to obey can never properly lead. If you've never been in the shoes of a follower, I don't know that you're going to be a great leader. Actions speak louder than words, and model the behavior you expect. That's it for this week, or should I say for today, because we do these shows a lot. I'm Booker Corrigan reminding you, you only get one shot at today. We clear? Okay. Ooh.